I learned 7 lessons working in a university and as a PhD student that revolutionized how I write my results section. And I continue to apply these lessons to every paper I write. The first lesson I learned was to create an image outline. I now create every figure and table first. I used to write my results and then create my figures and tables and try and fit them in. So my results section was always a complete mess. It had no structure, no logical flow, and was horrible for the reader to try and understand. After all, most images and tables in a scientific report are of the data, so they belong in the results section. Once they're ready, I rearrange them to create a visual story that is easy for my reader to follow. Next, I write my figure captions and table captions before I even think about writing the body text. And that's because figures and tables need to be standalone. By writing my captions first, I make sure that the reader can completely understand my figures and tables without having to read any of the main body text. Plus, once I'm writing my text, I can easily cite the relevant figure in order. Lesson 2 was structure. Even though I've already created a visual outline or visual story for my reader, I learned the structure of the results section needed to follow my aims and research questions. And the easiest way I found to do this was by grouping my data together. Data can be grouped in several different ways. For example, your data might be grouped together in chronological order, or in my case, I group my data by similar type. For example, I'm a geologist. In the results section of all my scientific reports, I have a subheading called geochemistry. Here I talk about my isotopes, major elements, and trace elements. It's all data about what my rocks are made of, so they're similar types of data. I also often have a section called morphology, which is all about what my rocks look like. Again, similar types of data. For example, color, texture, or structure. By grouping my data together in this way, it makes it much easier and faster for me to write my results section and follows my visual story much better. The third lesson I learned was that I had to decide how I wanted to describe my data before I wrote about it. I hadn't realized, but before I learned this lesson, I used to jump around from talking about averages to medians to raw data, and it was really confusing for my reader and made it really hard for me to write my results section. Now I always decide how I'm going to describe my data before I start writing about it. I usually choose between raw data, averages, medians, ranges, or ranks. And then I always provide my descriptive data in brackets after I provide my main finding. And that includes things like sample size, standard deviation, and sometimes a mean will go in here as well, depending on how I've decided to describe my main finding. Lesson number 4 was language. The language used in a results section is completely different from a methods or an introduction or even an abstract. Number 1, never use subjective terms like appears, indicates, or suggests. We're just reporting our findings, so it should be written in a factual and blunt manner, much like a Wikipedia page. But the biggest tip in language is to use active voice and present tense. Many people incorrectly advise to use past tense in your results section. In fact, many journals will reject papers and the reviewers will comment on the fact the results are incorrectly written in past tense. For example, if we did a study on trees in Central Australia, we might say there are 60 different types of trees. We wouldn't say there were 60 different types of trees because there still are. And that's because your results haven't changed. Or for example, when I'm studying my rocks, this rock is composed of XYZ, not this rock was composed. It still is. What my rock is made of has not changed. There is one trick here, and that's when you're talking about what you did to collect the results. For example, I recorded 60 different types of tree in this location. I recorded is in past tense because the recording component happened in the past. So it's all about how you phrase your results. So the result doesn't change and should be written in the present tense. If you're talking about what you did, then it's okay to write it in past tense. And this applies even to survey responses. For example, 60 females responded to the survey. That's fine because the responding part happened in the past. But in our survey, there are 60 different female responses. There are, not were. You do have 60 different female responses. It's a little bit tricky, but the best way to do it is to always use present tense. Then after you've written it, go back through and check each sentence to see if you are reporting what your result is, not was. Lesson 5 was to present my findings and not discuss them. There's no interpretation here. The results section is a concise summary of the findings of your entire study. It's important to present all of your results, so the positive, neutral, or even negative. But there is one exception. Don't include data that doesn't directly relate to answering your research question. We often do extra tests or data analyses that don't end up directly relating, and it's really tempting to write about them because we've done the work and we didn't want to have wasted our time. It's important that we don't include them in the results section or in the scientific report at all. Keep the results relevant. I also learned that you should never use a table if the data can be described in 1 or 2 sentences. Tables should be used where there's larger amounts of data to display. The biggest tip I learned about presenting my findings is that how I write about my data has to be different to how I display it in my figures and tables. They should complement each other and not copy each other. Lesson 6 was to check my research objectives. I needed to make sure that each of my research objectives was addressed by data or findings in the results section. And this guarantees that my study was complete and that I hadn't forgotten anything. Which brings me to the final lesson I learned, which was to make a note of any important findings as I went along. And this was to speed up writing my discussion later. I'd make a note of what the point and the supporting data was. I would then use this to help write my discussion next. For a step-by-step guide to writing a discussion section, watch this video next.